So today we're going to talk about novel approaches to depression treatment. So maybe you came from my last video and decided that you might have depression. Or maybe you're coming from a different perspective. Maybe you're on current medication for depression and it's not working. Maybe you're losing hope about your depressive condition. Well, I thought I'd make this video to basically talk about some novel approaches to medication in the treatment of depression. Some things that maybe you could try if you've decided you have depression. Or for people that are suffering from depression right now and are losing hope, which I know is such a big thing inside of depression, that there is hope. That there are things on the forefront of kind of research and treatment for depression that will come out very soon that will help you, or that you can discuss with your doctor and try now. So firstly, let's just go over the kind of where medication stands right now. And there are basically three categories of antidepressant. The first one is tricyclic antidepressants, or MAOIs. You don't need to know what that stands for. But basically what they do is increase epinephrine. Then you have dopaminergic medication like Wellbutrin, which like the name suggests increases dopamine. And then finally the most famous one is you have your SSRIs, which contrary to popular belief don't give you serotonin, but they actually inhibit the uptake of serotonin. Very interesting. But what does that mean? A lot of people, the problem is these medications don't work for them. A lot of these medications are quite difficult. Like for example, SSRIs, sometimes they don't actually affect a third of people that use them. That's quite high. And maybe you're experiencing that. Maybe these aren't working for you. So what can you do? So in this video we're going to discuss the kind of forefront of research surrounding depression. There are going to be some things that you definitely can implement into your life right now, at least with the kind of, not permission, but with the advice of your psychiatrist, and then some things that I don't recommend that you try. But anyway, they're there, and just for the sake of information, we're going to be telling you about it. And there we go, disclaimer for the video. Every video like this needs one. This isn't medical advice. This is a description of the current scientific sphere of research surrounding depression. Take it however you want. Don't act on these things or discuss a psychiatrist if you're thinking of acting on any one of them and you're on medication which might be impacted by any one of these things. Anyway, let's get into it. So the first one is very groundbreaking research into the link between inflammation and depression. And these are going to get quite technical. But stay with me because they all have a point to them. So inflammation, what is it? Well, basically, let's just be real simple. It's created by cytokines. And the brain gets inflamed as well. So you know how you can get inflamed on your body, like swelling, zits, whatever. Well, your brain can also get inflamed. And your glial cells, which are your kind of support cells inside of your brain, are quite a key component of this kind of inflammation, which is bad. Another thing you need to understand that serotonin, sometimes called 5-HT, derives from a substance called tryptophan. So tryptophan basically becomes serotonin is what you need to know. But for our intents and purposes, when you are heavily inflamed, when there are a lot of cytokines inside of your brain, they disrupt that synthesis. And basically what happens is tryptophan becomes a substance called kynurenine and then becomes quinolinic acid. And that is a pro-depressive substance. So basically when you're inflamed, your body can't create serotonin as well. Because there are two paths that tryptophan takes, either to quinolinic acid or to serotonin. And when you have high inflammation, more of that tryptophan goes down the route towards quinolinic acid. So that's very important. But how can you reduce inflammation? And the forefront of study right now is by something called an EPA, so EPA ingestion. And this, very simply, is kind of fat. And it comes from things like fish and fish oil. So if you've ever seen fish oil in the supermarket, you know how easy it is to get. And the threshold level for this is only 1 gram of EPA, which again is a very easy dose to achieve. Between 1 and 2 grams of EPAs daily has been shown to significantly alleviate symptoms of depression. So it's definitely something that you can incorporate into your life. And what does it do? Well, basically it limits those kind of cytokines and so means more serotonin is synthesized. If you suffer with depressive symptoms like grief or like the kind of more emotional side of depression, then this could very well help you. And it could have quite profound effects. In fact, it's been shown that kind of EPA ingestion of about a gram, 1,000 milligrams, has been shown to be as effective as SSRIs for a lot of people, but with just a hell of a lot less symptoms. And I am looking down a lot, so I apologise for that, but I've got my notes here. I'm just trying to make sure I say all the right things. Next we have creatine. So there's a lot of study right now into how creatine can also alleviate symptoms of depression. So basically, in your brain, in the front of your brain here, in the prefrontal cortex, you have something called the phosphocreatine system. And that system, again, is very much so linked with depression and those feelings of depression. And again, what these studies have shown is a normal dose of about 3 to 5 grams of creatine, which is a recommended dose, by the way. So it's not like we're saying you have to take 20 grams a day or anything. 3 to 5 grams of creatine has been shown to, number one, reduce the dosage needed of SSRIs. Number two, increase the effectiveness of a current SSRI dose. And even in the absence of SSRIs, it's been shown to have positive effects on depressive symptoms. What does this mean? It means basically you can start experimenting with creatine. Also what it means, quite interestingly, is if you've not disclosed your creatine consumption, if you're already taking it, this is for exercise and things like that, and you've not disclosed that to your physician, then you should probably do it if you're experiencing more kind of side effects than you'd like from SSRIs. Maybe it's to do with the fact that you're ingesting creatine and the effects that has on SSRIs. And then finally, inside of the kind of novel research that you can implement right now at home, well, we have the ketogenic diet. So the ketogenic diet has already seen a lot of popularity in treatment for epilepsy. And it works in a similar way for depression treatment. And that's basically because it increases your tonic GABA levels. So GABA is something that you find in your brain which basically, in the most simple way, inhibits a lot of brain functions. So for example, when you drink, that increases GABA. Different drugs like Xanax and benzodiazepines increase GABA. And that leads to basically the loss of inhibition. That's phase increase of GABA though. So when you have kind of more GABA in your body generally though, from tonic GABA, that just generally calms you down, and it reduces a lot of those kind of hyperactive symptoms which are very characteristic of epilepsy, but also in the exact same vein, because of that, can alleviate a lot of the symptoms of depression. What's so interesting about the keto diet though, and its kind of application in this context, is that there's evidence that people with refractory depressive disorders, and what that means is depressive disorders that can't be treated or maybe are unresponsive to treatment from other things, then the ketogenic diet actually has effect on those people. So, what does this mean? If you're losing hope with things like your SSRIs or different depression treatments that you're on, then maybe discussing switching to a ketogenic diet with your physician might be an avenue you can pursue. You can explain to them, well, yeah, I'm sure you don't need to explain to them, but you can understand yourself that these kind of refractory depressive disorders are actually helped quite a bit by switching to the ketogenic diet. That's a diet low in carbs, it promotes ketosis in the body basically. So, research that. But now we move into the more experimental novel treatment for depression and the more interesting treatment. And the first one is ketamine. So ketamine has seen a huge increase in depression treatment. Recently actually I read an article in The Guardian, I think. It was about the use of ketamine in the treatment of PTSD for soldiers in Ukraine. So there's definitely a big wave of ketamine becoming much more accepted within the scientific community and the wider community as a drug that can have very real effects in its reduction of symptoms of depression, traumatic stress disorders, things like that. So what does it do? Basically ketamine, also I've been told, produces a dissociative state within the brain. So what that means is it separates you effectively from your emotions, and that's been quite a powerful thing, ketamine therapy, because it separates the individual from their feelings of depression and from those negative emotions associated with it. What happens on the brain level though? And basically what happens is that ketamine creates oscillation of layer 5 neurons at 1 to 3 hertz, which means absolutely nothing to the wider population. But essentially what that means is it activates like the retrosplenial cortex. All big long words, but it means it promotes neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity, what is that? It's basically your brain's ability to change. And why this is so important is because the theory goes, at least, because we don't know exactly why this happens, but when you're in those dissociative states and you're separated from your emotions, then your brain changes in a way, neuroplasticity gets triggered, and it changes in a way that creates that distance more permanently. And that is kind of counterintuitive because it sounds a lot like anhedonia, dissociation. but it has been shown to alleviate symptoms of depression. And that doesn't mean go and do Ket. It just doesn't. Because these were done in very controlled scientific environments. They could control the dosage, they can control the purity, a lot of these things. But in a lot of US cities, in a lot of places around Europe now, ketamine is becoming more widely used inside of therapy. So, it's just one avenue of hope. And then finally, and the most interesting study, and one I think within the next few years will become almost standard for treatment of depression because of how fucking powerful these effects are the effects of psilocybin. So psilocybin magic mushrooms, that is, they directly affect your serotonin receptors. So there are various serotonin receptors, and those serotonin receptors are very active in layer 5 of the cortex. Where have we heard that before? Ketamine study. We just went over it, Brad. But yeah, psilocybin activates those serotonin receptors in layer 5 of the cortex, but generally in the brain at large. This is huge though. So I'm going to read you some data. So what you need to know firstly is that in a lot of these scientific practices, there's something called the GRID-HAMD test, which basically is a measure of depression between 0 and I believe 27, but I'm not exactly sure of that. Anyway, so the average for this test, they tested 22 people, and it was 22.8 was the score they got on that GRID-HAMD test, which is high. That is symptomatic, or not symptomatic, but that is kind of, it shows substantial depression or major depression. They definitely classify as MDD, so major depressive disorder. Now then, after the treatment of psilocybin, after just 2 treatments of psilocybin, that depression went down to 8. That is insane. That is a reduction of more than 50%. It makes it very statistically significant that psilocybin definitely had an effect on these individuals. So there were 17 participants, 71% of people at week 1, and crucially as well, 71% of people at week 14 had significant reductions in their depressive symptoms. What does that mean? Well, basically it means that even after a very long period of time, those things stick around. This is crazy. This is so insane. And within 2 years, I hope, this might become actual standard practice within depression. But what it basically means is that instead of having to commit for the rest of your fucking however many years to doing SSRIs or different treatments that pump things into your brain, that you can do literally 2 courses of this psilocybin treatment and be cured for a very, very long time. Interestingly, they also tell you the dosage. Again, I don't recommend you do this. But, so psilocybin, 20 mg per 70 kilograms in the first session and 30 mg per 70 kilograms in session 2. Again, genuinely though, I'm being serious now, I don't honestly recommend that you do this. It can seem like quite an appealing thing to try because, let's be real bro, we've all done mushrooms, you can find them. It's an issue though because you can't properly dose it yourself. To find 20 mg of psilocybin is very difficult to do if you're just using fucking mushrooms, bro. Because they have so many different levels of psilocybin in them, it's hard to get an exact dosage of psilocybin. It's very difficult. Another problem is that you can have very real bad trips, especially if you suffer from depression, then that can be a huge issue. They're very scary to do. It's a long trip. It lasts for 9-10 hours. And it can be very bad and very, very distressing, especially if you suffer from depression. So again, I would suggest do not do this. And especially, because I'm going to be real, when people hear this advice, a lot of people will do it. So it would actually be irresponsible of me not to say this. But if you are going to do this, if you are going to try and use magic mushrooms to cure your depression, then remember set and setting. Remember, create an environment that is happy and that is peaceful. And remember to use a trip sitter or a trusted person that can kind of supervise your trip and make sure that you don't go too far into this sort of distressing world. And that's just something I'm going to say because realistically, I know how it is. Look, I suffer from depression. Depression is bad, you feel hopeless. And there are times when, things like that seem very appealing. If I tell you now that psilocybin is shown to fucking cut in half depression symptoms, and for a long time as well, there'll be a lot of people that try it. But if you're going to, then be very careful with dosage. Make sure you're using things that are properly dosed. And make sure you follow set and setting and have proper trip sitters that can follow you along that journey. But to carry on the disclaimer, the research in all of these things that we spoke about today is very much still in progress. And an extra disclaimer, if you're on current medication like SSRIs, then don't try these things without speaking to a medical professional first. But if you're not on SSRIs or believe you have mild depression, then definitely try these things. Try the 1 gram of EPAs, try the 3 grams of creatine, try the ketogenic diet. Those things aren't particularly risky. There isn't much risk involved in any of them. They're not addictive like ketamine might be. They're not very risky. They don't have long-term side effects. So definitely try those things if you want to alleviate some of your symptoms. Anyway, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Drop a subscribe if you gained any value from it. And yeah, brother, just remember I am so proud of you. I'll see you in the next video, so I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.